Hello my friend and welcome back. My name is Hannah and today let's talk about Morphe. If you're curious about what I'm wearing on my face, what I mentioned in today's video, and what I'm doing in other pockets of the internet, I always have links in the description box down below, so don't forget to check them out. I'm a very small creator. The only people really making any kind of money off of you shopping my links is tinyurl, and that's simply because that's the website I use to make a tiny URL so I can fit everything down below. I feel like I am definitely the last person to be talking about this topic, but I kind of want to join in on the conversation because I feel like there are a lot of things being said and addressed about Morphe, but also at the same time some things that aren't being addressed. So as I'm filming this, it's been a few days since Morphe has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or at least the Forma brand, and that's like the, I don't know, you know how Estee Lauder owns a lot of different makeup brands? They're like the Mother Hub brand. That's what Forma Beauty is. They own Jaclyn Cosmetics, and I think it's another influencer brand, I think, and Morphe and all of Morphe's like sister brands. And it's come out that like Morphe owes like millions of dollars, or like 1 point something million dollars to not just Jaclyn Hill, but also Jeffree Star. And there's a lot to unpack here. So if you're just a brief history of Morphe. Morphe was one of those makeup brands that kind of popped up around the same time as Colourpop. You were a lot of the time, like especially in the 2012 to 2016 era of beauty content, you were either like Team Morphe or Team Colourpop. Everyone wanted to be the Morphe babe, and you would get this affiliate code, you know, and influencers, big and small on YouTube, were advertising Morphe. And I guess kind of watching that content at that time, you know, like I understand that like it's monetization, or like, you know, it's you get paid to work with a brand, especially if you have like a code, you know, because every time someone uses your code when shopping, that person or yourself, if that's you, is making like a commission off of someone using that code. So that's why, you know, I even stress that like my codes aren't sponsored or affiliated or copy and pastes of anybody else's codes, because I don't know, like me personally, I would rather just spend the full money than give any money to like a James Charles, point blank. And there are people like that, and then there are people who just don't care, and then they use honey, and then they use whatever codes because they just want to spend their money. They want to get that product. I get it. I get both sides of the coin. And I think especially earlier on, you see the success of like Jaclyn Hill and many MUA and all these smaller content creators that were kind of like building up, and they're advertising Morphe, and everybody wants to get PR. That a lot of people like at least at my level of content creating, where their stuff isn't monetized, they're not sponsored, they're not affiliated, were super buying all of Morphe so they could advertise it, so they could also be a part of, you know, when searching for that new Morphe palette or that new Morphe collection, their video would pop up. And I think as well that people kind of forget that that's how Morphe did a lot of its business. And then at some point in time, the owners of Morphe shifted. They were owned, I think that's either when they were bought out by Forma, or like Morphe itself was run by a completely different team. Jeffree Star talks about it in an interview. And different influencers that were really like, I don't know, elbow deep in the Morphe game have also come out and said that their relationship with the brand changed as soon as there was a change of owners. And it just makes me wonder, like, I understand wanting to get paid, and like I guess it would be like working your current job and then your boss saying, hey, like I'm leaving but a new boss is coming in, and instead of getting paid what you're normally paid, you're gonna get less. I understand the frustration, but then also understand that like at that time that like Morphe was also making like a ton of money. A ton of money. But then I get it too, right? Because if you're the content creator and you're advertising the product, you want to get paid, because then you're getting other people to buy those products. So like your commission code or your sponsored code or whatever you want to call it when you make that commission shouldn't be lowered, like, you know, but then I don't know. Capitalism is like a big ugly thing, and I understand that people get greedy, but then also if you're doing the work, like, get paid your worth. Like, my head's spinning. But my biggest problem with Morphe is that I think how do I phrase this nicely? Because you might be someone that really loves Morphe, and I do not want to take that away from you from loving Morphe, but I think Morphe's problem was that, like, its formula for the time was affordable, and it was very much like the dupes of the bigger brands of the time. And the bigger brands at the time when Morphe first came out was like Too Faced and NARS and Lorac, and you know, they're pretty pricey, right? Like, but then a Morphe palette would be like $20-30, and you would get like these big giant eyeshadow palettes where if you bought something from like Urban Decay, you would get like a 9-pan eyeshadow palette, and it would be like $60, $70 kind of thing, and people didn't want to spend, and I get it, you know, like, you want to live within your means, and sometimes the more expensive palette is not within your means. But I think the biggest problem with Morphe is a similar problem that we're seeing with a lot of other brands currently. Like, I hear this a lot about Too Faced, and that Too Faced hasn't updated their formula since like 2012. Like, it's been exactly the same, and formulas have improved and changed with time, and you have all these indie brands, you know, like take like a Blend Bunny Cosmetics or even an Unearthly Cosmetics that have these beautiful eyeshadow palettes with a wonderful formula, and they're kind of like a fraction of the price. So if you're paying that high-end price for something from Too Faced or Urban Decay, you're kind of expecting it to perform at that price range. And even though Morphe is affordable, I don't think that they updated their eyeshadow formula. And with time, you know, you hear that like, oh, they've made improvements and made it a little bit better. But to me personally, Morphe was always one of those makeup brands where, like, I don't know, they were kind of like the Wet n Wild or the Revlon. Like, they were the drugstore version of makeup brands, but I grew up in a time where like Revlon and Wet n Wild like had the chalkiest, driest like little eyeshadow quads, and the makeup like wasn't good. The formula wasn't good. You know, like you would grow up and see pictures of like Spice Girls and like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and try to recreate those looks using those little quads. And you couldn't, because what those girls were using, you know, for their photo shoots was like high-end, expensive makeup that, you know, you would maybe be able to find at Macy's, if that. Like, it's kind of funny to think about like how makeup now is so easily accessible versus like even back in the 90s where that wasn't the case. Like, you had your drugstore brand, and then you had your high-end stuff that was inside the Macy's. Like, Ulta's and Sephora's didn't exist. You had to go like into the mall, into like where they sold like designer things, like at Macy's. Like, I don't know, it like bothers me. Like, I feel like I'm aging myself online. And I just feel like the kind of quality of makeup like isn't good, and I don't know, this could just be me. Maybe you disagree. This is now like a personal take on this, but I feel like the Morphe formula wasn't actually good. That a lot of the content creators that were using the products, obviously they got paid to sell a product. Obviously they made a commission off of those codes, and I think that kind of started to be the problem, was that, you know, they were pushing not that great of product. And because I think about the people in my own personal life that I would work with or go to school with who would buy Morphe, and like the kind of makeup looks that they would do, and then how they would just get frustrated because they'd be like, I know I spent like $20 on this big giant eyeshadow palette, but I mostly reach for, you know, this like naked palette from Urban Decay, and I would rather use that. And it's just frustrating because I just think Morphe kind of stayed in that bubble. And then when they kind of canceled themselves by, you know, not keeping those relationships with those influencers that they had, like their ability to sell product became a little bit harder, because then you had like the mid-tier content creators who, after the big content creators all got canceled and the Dramageddons and all the drama left and right, those mid-tier content creators were more focused on indie brands, and they would even say things like, I'm not a huge fan of Morphe, or like, I don't buy Morphe, I don't really like their products, or like, they're just a brand that I don't personally trust. And it's weird because I remember like Sigma brushes were super advertised by like Jaclyn Hill and the Morphe eyeshadow palettes, but even Sigma, when they started creating their own makeup lines outside of their brushes, improved with time and with their formula. And even now currently they still have those influencer bundles that you can purchase. Like, I think Heather Austin just came out with one, and Samantha March had one. I think even Angie had one. Like, they're constantly having those bundles, and then they'll have like makeup collabs with some content creators, but they're still like doing the codes, they're still making the quality products, and now they're doing like franchise collabs, like the Alice in Wonderland collection. And even though they're known for their brushes and they're still holding on to that, they're kind of expanding it and being smart with their business. Gosh, Sigma also has like a shady past. LS made a perfect video of like the history of Sigma. If you haven't watched it, I'll have it linked down below. It's a really good video. But Morphe, I think, tried to like cut all of its old like history, but I think it's for a reason, because you have like the Jaclyn Hill scandals and her eyeshadow palettes, and the Jeffree Star scandals, and the James Charles scandals, and the Nikita Dragun scandals. And it's like, if you were an influencer with Morphe, at some point you went through some kind of drama, and then an eyeshadow palette with Morphe was supposed to release like the following week or something crazy like that. And I just think that kind of hurt them. So they wanted to avoid that, which I understand. But instead of maybe touching base with, I don't know, better content creators, or like, not as problematic content creators, they made a sister brand, Morphe 2, that was supposed to go for the TikTokers. And a lot of the TikTokers that they had associated with that brand themselves also got caught up in drama and mishap. And I think even the D'Amelios, who were like the head of that brand, were like best friends with like James Charles. Like, it was just really, really weird how all of that like kind of came together. And I mean, as I say all of this in like one breath, I feel like I'm talking so fast, but as I say all of this, I'm like not surprised. I kind of saw this coming a mile away, because I personally just never thought that the Morphe quality was that great. Even for it being affordable, like, it just never catered to what like people want. Like, there's a small group of people that want those big, large palettes, but they only stuck to those big, large palettes. They never really updated or changed their formula too much. And a lot of it just kind of seemed like a rinse and repeat. And they're personally a brand that I was never like truly interested in. I think if I ever bought anything from Morphe, like their website, it was because I was trying to buy like another brand. That like now, like I think they were selling like the Iconic brand, but now you can get that from like Sephora and maybe even Ulta, I think. I don't know, it's just such a, it's so bizarre, it's so weird. And the way that like, they closed all of their stores, laid off all of their employees. I've been seeing those kind of posts since October of 2022. And, they finally did like the final blow, in December, like a few days before Christmas. And it was weird to me that a lot of content creators weren't talking about it. But then the content creators that were talking about Morphe were just doing that like 2016 Morphe thing of like, here's the new product, use my code if you want a discount. And I even noticed too, like because I watch a few different new makeup release videos from different content creators, and even they don't really talk about the new Morphe releases, very rarely. Like, and if they do, they never spend too much time on it. And I don't know, since Morphe's owned by Forma and they filed for bankruptcy, I wouldn't be surprised if like Jaclyn Hill's brand kind of tanked. And I would be kind of surprised if James Charles's brand even launches. It was supposed to launch like this spring, and it's been pushed back a number of times, and I feel like I just have like a sneaking suspicion that Morphe or Forma was the brand or whatever that James Charles was opening his makeup line with. It would make sense. He had such a, him and Jaclyn had like sold the most eyeshadow palettes like as a collaboration effort. It would like the trio was like Jaclyn Hill, James Charles, and Jeffree Star, and we saw what happened with Jeffree and with James. And Jaclyn, even the products that she had been releasing lately were hit or miss a lot of the time. And I don't know. I'm not surprised. I don't think, you know, Jaclyn and Jeffree are going to see any of that money. I don't think a lot of the content creators that like worked with this brand are going to see any of the money that's owed to them, really, especially when filing for bankruptcy. So I don't know. I guess what I want to leave on is that I think we went through like a big, I feel like the makeup community right now is kind of going through like what the Japanese economy went through in like the 1980s, where like it popped and everything just like sank, because I think we're seeing that like brands that we thought were going to stick around forever are kind of dropping off. But I mean, think about it. Their makeup has been a thing that we as a society have used since forever, for like millennia. A lot of the brands from the Victorian era aren't here. A lot of the brands, you know, from like the 70s aren't here. Some brands from the 80s are kind of still sticking around, but more as like a legacy brand, you know, and they have other things below them where they are sticking around because they've bought up other bigger brands. Like I don't know when Estee Lauder like first started, but I mean, like, that's what I mean by legacy brand. Like, they've been around for the longest, but I mean, like, you know, I'm sure there were brands that even came out like in 2010 that like none of us remember. Like, gosh, when did like Coastal Scents come out? They're no longer a brand, but I don't think they've been a brand for a long time. And I just think that now we're starting to see the shift and change, because people's spending habits are changing. The amount of money people can spend is changing, and what we expect in quality and formula is definitely changing. Like, I don't, for as much as I see people buy up makeup, review makeup and things like that, like, I know we all talk about like the Maybelline Sky High mascara, but Maybelline releases quads all the time. I see no one talking about those, even when talking about drugstore, because when they talk about drugstore, they're picking up NYX, they're picking up e.l.f., they're picking up maybe Morphe or even Colourpop, you know, if they're shopping at their Target or Ulta, because that's the new drugstore. I don't see people talking about, you know, like the Kate Moss lipsticks. I think those are still maybe around. I think I saw them at my Walmart, or maybe my Walmart is just selling old product. But I mean, like, there's just different things, and I don't know. I don't know how long these brands are going to be sticking around. I don't know, like, gosh, even Too Faced sold, like, the owners of Too Faced aren't, it's like not that Scott guy anymore, or was his name even Scott, but I think they sold to like Estee Lauder. Like, I just think the makeup brands are going to be smaller, and we're kind of like restarting, but I don't think we're restarting to have like a big surge in brands again. Like, I think once we start seeing more brands kind of populating, that would maybe be a sign that the economy is getting better, but I think we're only just seeing signs of the economy kind of struggling a bit more. And I mean, if you're in California like myself, you are getting notices that like your electric and gas bills are going to be higher, and I'm sorry, I would rather run my air conditioning than buy a foundation, that kind of thing. So things are just getting pricey, things are just getting expensive, and you know, I think people would rather buy the Natasha Denona palette and like that be the palette that they use for a long time, and then they'll buy another one maybe a year or so down the line. Like, I don't think that we're in that big makeup boom that we were in from 2010 to 2019 kind of thing. I just think, not that it's like the end of makeup or the end of beauty, I just think I just think it's like kind of like a hard reset, and because even the kind of content that a lot of us like to watch, a lot of it's declutters. My declutters personally have gotten way more views than any of my other videos. Like I think my eyeshadow declutter video was like, I don't know, like 1,000 views or something like that. Like it's pretty high. And I think we're seeing a lot more like project pans. We're seeing a lot more like dupe videos where, you know, like new collections or palettes or whatever are coming out, and people are recreating that with shades that they already have in their collection. And I'm also seeing brands like Odin's Eye and Lethal kind of, you know, well, Lethal has been doing the single eyeshadow palettes for a long time. Odin's Eye just released their single eyeshadow palettes, but I think we're going to start seeing more of that maybe, rather than like larger palettes, because, you know, people would rather just kind of buy the 1 or 2 shades and buy like the big giant palette, especially if, you know, they're just looking for something that's not already in their collection. But I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below. Were you someone that really loved Morphe? Did you, I don't know, did you use someone's like Morphe babe code, or maybe you were a content creator that had a Morphe babe code? I don't know, do you know anything about business or economy? I just, every time I hear bankruptcy stated, I always think of like Michael Scott saying, I'm filing bankruptcy. But I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below. And if you liked hanging out with me today and you would like to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well so you don't miss out on another video. This was kind of fun to kind of like ramble about Morphe. So I don't know, like there's a few other topics that I would like to talk about as well. So if you like this kind of like, I don't know, chit-chatty kind of video, maybe you're listening to me as you're getting ready for work or whatever, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I'll talk about Andrew Callahan because I have some thoughts and opinions about that as well, but maybe you don't care. But I don't know. Anyway, I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye.